Hello guys and welcome. Tonight, let's take a very slow and quiet journey back through the pages of history. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in a dim stone workshop on a cold autumn night. The year is late 1294, and the world outside is dark and still. Inside this small chamber, a gentle orange glow dances on rough smoke-stained walls. There is an old wooden door behind you, firmly shut against the chill of the night and the prying eyes of the world. The air is heavy with a mix of strange smells. The sharp tang of sulfur mingles with the bitter scent of vinegar and the earthy odor of damp ash. In one corner, a faint whiff of something rotting, perhaps old herbs or a forgotten egg yolk used in some experiment, adds a sour note to the air. It's not a pleasant smell, but it is the smell of centuries of hope and failure combined, the aroma of a medieval alchemist's lab. Before we delve deeper into this quiet scene, I invite you to take a slow breath and let the calm of this moment surround you. If you find comfort in these gentle historical journeys, feel free to softly tap the like button and consider subscribing for more. It helps me know you're here listening in the dark. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach across the world. Thank you for being here with me. Now, let's return to that little workshop where a lone figure toils by candlelight while the rest of the world sleeps. Imagine an aging man, an alchemist, hunched over a wooden workbench near the center of the room. His figure is bathed in the warm glow of a single tallow candle, and by the embers of a small furnace beside him. Shadows flicker across the stone walls and the heavy timber beams above, beams long since blackened by years of smoky fumes. The alchemist moves slowly and deliberately, careful not to make any sudden noise. The only sounds are the soft crackling of charcoal in the furnace and the occasional clink of glass or metal as he adjusts his tools. Perhaps you can hear the faint bubbling of a liquid in a flask, or the quiet sigh he lets out as he concentrates on his task. Each sound is gentle and muffled, as if wrapped in the same layer of dust that covers everything in this workshop. Even a small spider in the high corner of the ceiling sits unmoving in its web, a fine lacework dusted with soot, as if the creature itself were respecting the hush. A sleepy moth flutters near one of the rafters and then settles, for there is no breeze or sudden light to urge it on. Every inch of this space is part of the stillness, waiting with the alchemist for whatever may come. Take a moment to look around through your mind's eye. The workbench is littered with odd objects. There are scorched crucibles, little clay cup-like pots sitting in a row, each blackened by countless firings. Some are cracked from the heat and sudden cooling, bearing quiet witness to experiments gone wrong. There are glass flasks and alembics too, delicate blown glass vessels with long, slender necks. A few have been stained yellow or sooty black by the chemicals they've held. One or two lie shattered in a corner, their broken shards carefully gathered into a small pile to avoid stray cuts. Shelves line the walls, though shelf might be a generous term for the few sagging wooden planks mounted on brackets. On these shelves sit earthenware jars and squat bottles, a cluttered library of ingredients. The jars hold powders and metals and curious substances, dull gray lead pellets, bright yellow sulfur chunks, a sealed glass container where quicksilver mercury gleams like trapped moonlight, and various crystalline salts and dried herbs. Each container is carefully stoppered or tied with waxed cloth, and many are marked only by mysterious symbols instead of plain labels. The alchemist has his own private code, astrological signs, alchemical glyphs, and cryptic drawings adorn the jars to guard the secrets within. You notice, for example, a flask of red powder labeled with a symbol of the sun, indicating gold or something related to the sun's sulfurous principle, while another jar of heavy gray metal bears the mark of Saturn, denoting lead. This is how alchemists store their knowledge, partly in substances and partly in secrecy. In the corner of the room looms the furnace, the very heart of this laboratory. It's a stout structure built of brick and clay, roughly as tall as a man's chest. Alchemists call this kind of furnace an athanor, the philosophical furnace, considered the soul of their workshop. Inside it, a steady fire has been burning for weeks on end, maintained carefully day and night. Even now, late into the night, the coals inside the athanor glow a dim orange red behind a small iron door. The heat emanating from it is constant and comforting in the cold gloom, but also intense. You can see the alchemist's face flushed and sweaty on one side from standing near it for so long. This furnace has several compartments built within it, each at a different level, allowing multiple vessels to be heated at various temperatures simultaneously. At the top, for instance, a sealed clay retort is nestled, slowly cooking a mixture that requires gentle, persistent warmth, so gentle that the flame must never be allowed to go out completely for months at a time. Lower down, another crucible sits directly in the hottest heart of the fire, containing metals that glow yellow-white as they melt together. Our alchemist tends to each of these with patient care. He gently prods the coals with a long iron poker, making sure no part of the fire dies down too much. He then adjusts a set of bellows, a simple device of wood and leather that when squeezed sends a focused puff of air into the furnace to enliven the flames. With each soft whoosh of the bellows, the coals brighten and flare for a moment, casting dancing light across the man's tired face. You might notice his features in that flicker. He is middle-aged or perhaps a bit older. It's hard to tell in the dim light and by the lines etched from worry and smoke. His hair is thinning and unkempt, straggles of ashen gray and soot-black strands hanging about his ears. His beard is short but scraggly, with tiny specks of ash caught in it. His eyes are what strike you most. They are weary, with dark circles shadowed beneath them, and they squint slightly in the dimness as he peers at his equipment. These eyes have seen years of midnight vigils like this one, straining to read faded manuscripts by candlelight and to watch potions simmer for hours on end. They water a bit from the acrid smoke that occasionally wafts up when he opens the furnace door. He pauses to wipe them with the back of his sleeve, which leaves a smudge of black ash across his forehead where he brushed away the sweat earlier. This simple gesture tells a quiet story of its own. The alchemist is very tired. You can see his attire more clearly now. He wears a long, stained leather apron over a humble woolen tunic. The apron was once a pale tan color, but now it's blotched with dark burn marks and curious smears from countless spills. Each stain has a story there, a splash of acid that narrowly missed burning his skin. Over here, a scorch mark from a sudden flare of fire when a mixture ignited unexpectedly. Beneath the apron, the sleeves of his brownish tunic are rolled up to his elbows, and you can glimpse forearms mapped with faint scars and shiny patches, old burns and chemical irritations that healed over time. His hands, too, are rough and calloused, with ink stains on the fingertips and a burn or two on the knuckles. Yet he moves with a careful, methodical grace, as if long accustomed to working in heat and semi-darkness. He seems utterly unbothered by his tattered, sooty appearance. In this solitary workshop, there is no need for finery, only practicality, and the stains and scars of hard work, worn almost like badges of honor. He takes a slow breath and steps back from the furnace for a moment, allowing himself a brief rest. The room is quite cramped, so as he steps back, his shoulders almost touch a tall wooden cabinet behind him. This cabinet is one of his most prized possessions. Its double doors are closed and secured with a simple iron lock. Inside are his books and notes, years and years of painstaking observations, recipes and secrets scribbled onto parchment. Perhaps there is even a smaller locked box within the cabinet, containing a particularly precious manuscript or a fragment of an ancient recipe written in code. The locked cabinet is a gentle reminder of how secretive this work is. The outside world must not casually see these books. In these times, knowledge of alchemy could be as dangerous as any weapon or as incriminating as any forbidden heresy. So he keeps it hidden under lock and key, and often in coded language only he can interpret. On top of the cabinet you notice something curious, a small wooden crucifix and a worn set of rosary beads lying coiled beside it. It might seem strange to find these religious items in a place of arcane experiments, but in the medieval world, an alchemist often lives a double life. By day, this man might attend Mass, say his prayers, perhaps even be part of a monastic order or a guild of physicians. By night, he pursues what many would consider a forbidden art, and so he prays for protection and guidance. Before he began tonight's work, maybe he uttered a soft Latin prayer under his breath, asking God or the saints for clarity and insight in his search. In the flicker of the candlelight, those rosary beads cast a faint shadow on the wall, like a gentle reassurance that faith is not entirely absent here, even among the bottles and fumes. He might occasionally pause to touch them, grounding himself with a whispered Ave Maria when doubt or fear creeps in. Now our alchemist returns to the bench to check on a glass alembic that sits in a sand bath over some coals. This alembic is a pear-shaped glass vessel with a long neck connected to a thin spout that leads into a waiting receiver flask. Inside its belly, a mixture of liquids is slowly being distilled. You can see the firelight shining through the glass, illuminating the swirling vapor inside as it condenses on the cool upper curve and drips down through the spout. The process is slow and requires patience. A drop forms and falls only every few moments, making a soft tap as it falls into the receiver. The alchemist watches intently, counting these drops in his mind, ensuring the rate matches what the recipe described. The recipe for this particular distillation might be something he copied from an older text, written perhaps a century or more ago by another hopeful soul. It instructed him to distill aqua vitae, the spirit of wine, 7 times to extract its pure essence. In practice, that means he is repeatedly boiling and condensing a strong wine or fermented brew to get highly concentrated alcohol. He believes this spirit, pure and subtle, might be one step on the long road to creating the fabled elixir of life, or an essential ingredient for the philosopher's stone. The room smells of this process too, a sweet yet sharp odor of strong spirits, mingled with herbal undertones, for the wine was steeped with rosemary and sage. It's a bit like the scent of spiced mead, left simmering too long, a cloying, heady aroma that weaves through the sharper smells of sulfur and ash. As he observes the alembic, the alchemist runs a hand through his hair, leaving streaks of soot in it. He picks up a quill pen from the bench and opens a small notebook or diary, just a few sheets of parchment, bound between simple wood covers. In the unsteady light, he jots down a quick note about what he sees, perhaps the time of night, the number of drops per minute falling from the alembic, the color or clarity of the distillate in the receiving flask. His handwriting is cramped and spidery, the Latin words and alchemical symbols abbreviated to save space. Ink blots dot the page here and there, and the edges of the parchment are smudged with dark fingerprints. Keeping records like this is vital to him, even though his fingers are cold and his eyes ache from lack of sleep. It's the only way he might later retrace his steps to see what went wrong or what slight improvement occurred. And so, with each experiment, he fills more pages. Over the years, these pages have multiplied. He has stacks of them in that cabinet, tied up with twine, each bundle representing months or years of lonely trial and error. Now imagine him pausing and closing his eyes for a moment, quill still in hand. He lets out a long, quiet sigh in the stillness of the night. What is he thinking in this solitary hour? Perhaps he is bone-weary and fighting the urge to give up for the night. But more likely, he is thinking of that grand goal that keeps him going, the dream that drew him into this pursuit in the first place. In fact, he recalls the very moment that goal took root in his heart. Many years ago, when he was a boy just on the verge of scholarly life, he overheard an older monk speak in hushed, reverent tones about a miraculous substance that could transmute lead into gold. The monk had described it as lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone, and hinted that it could even confer perfect health and longevity. He still remembers how his heart quickened at those words, how a spark was lit in his young imagination. At the time, it sounded like a biblical miracle, water turned to wine at Cana, or perhaps something from the tales of saints. The idea that behind the mundane appearance of metals, there might lurk a secret transformative principle enthralled him utterly. That was the beginning. The notion that somewhere in the hidden order of nature, God had placed a wondrous secret waiting to be discovered. Ever since that day, through all his formal studies of Aristotle's natural philosophy and the long hours poring over obscure alchemical texts, that idea has never left him. It has become the guiding star of his life. In his mind's eye now, he visualizes it clearly, the philosopher's stone itself, that miraculous substance that could perfect all imperfect things. They call it the stone, or sometimes the powder, or the tincture. Some say it could instantly transmute any base metal, like lead or iron, into pure gold, with just a sprinkle. Others say it could be used as the elixir of life, an alchemist or universal medicine that can cure any disease and prolong life indefinitely. To an outsider, these might sound like impossible fairy tales or the fever dreams of a greedy mind. But to our alchemist, this is a sacred quest. He doesn't see it as mere greed. For him, finding the stone would be like finding divine truth. He truly believes that such a perfection of matter might be possible, because in the medieval worldview, everything in nature strives toward perfection. If lead left in the ground for long ages can naturally turn to silver, and silver to gold, as many alchemists argue, then perhaps art can imitate that process in a lifetime. Perhaps man, using the mind God gave him, can learn to hasten nature's work and achieve that perfect state. He thinks of all the ancient authorities who hinted at this secret in their writings. In front of him on the bench lies a parchment copy of a very old text, one of his most treasured manuscripts. The writing on it is in Latin, but he knows it was translated from Arabic centuries ago. The name of the original author is given as Geber, a legendary master alchemist from distant times. In truth, an 8th century polymath from the Islamic Golden Age, though medieval Latin alchemists thought of Geber almost as a mysterious sage. This particular text has been his guide for months. Its pages are filled with dense instructions and allegories, phrases that are difficult to decipher but tantalizing. By candlelight earlier this evening, our alchemist was rereading a passage for perhaps the 100th time. In careful cryptic Latin, it describes the steps of an opus magnum, the great work, but instead of plainly naming ingredients, it speaks in riddles. Marry the red king with the white queen, under the rays of the sun, and the green lion shall consume them. These enigmatic words swirl in the alchemist's mind as he tries to interpret them into practical steps. Over time, he has come to learn that the red king might represent gold, or a sulfuric form of the active male principle, while the white queen could be purified silver, or mercury, the passive female principle. The green lion devouring the sun, that image took him weeks of pondering. Eventually, he realized it likely refers to a strong acid, green vitriol, a sulfate dissolving gold, the sun-colored metal. Indeed, he recalls that another manuscript containing this same phrase is even illustrated with a drawing of a green lion swallowing a golden orb. Such is the language of alchemy, full of symbols, mythic metaphors, and coded imagery. It's a language our alchemist has been laboriously learning for years, like a second tongue, and it is one of his constant frustrations and fascinations. Another illustration in that manuscript often perplexes and inspires him. It depicts a regal red king and a pale white queen standing together and then bizarrely merging into a single androgynous figure under a starry sky. This is an allegory for the mystical chemical wedding, the union of the Red King, sometimes symbolizing sulfur or the sun, the male principle, and the White Queen, symbolizing Mercury, or the moon, the female principle. The artwork is richly colored and haunting. The king wears a crown with a brilliant sun emblem. The queen wears a silver crescent moon diadem. They hold each other in a loving embrace, and as they do, their bodies fuse into one two-headed being, holding a serpent that curves into a circle, an Ouroboros around them. It's a strange, almost otherworldly image, yet beautiful in its symbolism of wholeness. He ponders it often. It suggests that only by conjoining opposing forces, fire and water, sulfur and mercury, masculine and feminine, can the miracle of the stone be born. When his eyes are too strained to read more words, he will sometimes simply gaze at this image by candlelight, letting its mysterious message drift into his subconscious. Perhaps one day, he thinks its meaning will become clear in a flash of insight or a vivid dream. Consider how he obtained that Gibber manuscript page and others like it. It was not easy. Books of alchemical knowledge are precious and often guarded or fragmented. To gather the wisdom he needed, he went to great lengths. He remembers a certain winter many years ago when he traveled on horseback for days to reach a distant monastery renowned for its library of forbidden texts. There, in a cold scriptorium that smelled of ink, dust, and candle wax, he humbly begged the abbot for permission to see an alchemical treatise believed to be locked away. The monks were wary. Alchemy borders on heresy, or at least folly in their eyes. But one brother, sympathetic to learning, quietly allowed him to copy the text under close supervision. For weeks he labored in that cloistered library, his breath fogging in the frigid air as he carefully transcribed, line after line by lamplight. The manuscript he copied was ancient and partially damaged. In places the ink had faded, or entire lines were missing where the parchment had been eaten away by time. He had to guess at some missing words and carefully replicate strange symbols drawn in the margins. He vividly recalls one evening when the candle was guttering low and all the other monks had retired. He remained, eyes straining in the dim light, tracing a complex diagram of planetary signs and dragons entwined. In that silent moment, he felt utterly absorbed, not noticing the cold or his aching back, only the thrill of capturing that knowledge on his own pages. When he finally left the monastery, with his precious copy rolled up and tucked safely in his saddlebag, he felt as if he carried a great treasure. In truth, he was carrying treasure. Knowledge was treasure to a man like him. That worn copy, a Latin translation of an Arabic book of balances, he later learned, now rests safely in his cabinet, its pages covered in his notes and corrections. It became one of his guiding texts, though deciphering it has proven a lifelong challenge. The alchemist has spent countless nights in silence like that, trying to peel back layers of meaning from such manuscripts. The authors often jealously hid their discoveries, encoding them in metaphor to prevent the uninitiated from misusing or misunderstanding the art. There are tales among alchemists of false recipes deliberately circulated to mislead the greedy or unworthy, or entire books written as elaborate traps for the arrogant. Yet scattered among the deceptive passages are also morsels of genuine wisdom, often in the form of cryptic mottos. One famous phrase he came across reads, "Visite interia terrae, rectificando in venis occultum lapidem." Visit the interior of the earth, and by purifying you will find the hidden stone. Alchemists often abbreviate it as vitriol. He reflects on this line frequently. On the surface, it advises the seeker to dig deep into the earth or matter and refine it to obtain the stone. But he senses a double meaning: to look within himself, to purify his own soul or intellect, believing that perhaps the true secret might reveal itself only when the alchemist is as pure and patient as his materials. Such contemplative maxims keep him philosophically grounded. They remind him that his arduous labor is not just a physical process, but a spiritual journey of self-improvement as well. All this contributes to an intense feeling of isolation. Who can he truly ask for guidance or confirmation? There is no open school of alchemy where one can enroll, no friendly guild that openly advertises its members' skills. Every practitioner works in secrecy, passing knowledge only to chosen apprentices or cloaking it in dense allegory. Perhaps when our alchemist was younger, he did benefit from a mentor, a wandering scholar, or an old monastic alchemist who saw potential in him. If so, that mentor is long gone, and now he must stand on his own. Or perhaps he is largely self-taught, piecing together scraps of wisdom from many sources without ever having a master to show him the way. In any case, there's no colleague by his side tonight to say, I see the problem, do this instead, or be careful, that step could be dangerous. If he misreads a line in a manuscript and adds the wrong ingredient at the wrong time, the only immediate teacher is failure itself. He once attempted to remedy that loneliness by taking on an apprentice, a bright-eyed local youth who had been hanging around his porch, fascinated by the whispers of magic and sulfuric smells wafting from within. For a while, having the boy around was a welcome change. They would grind powders and tend the furnace together. The alchemist patiently taught him basic techniques, like how to calcine eggshells into chalk, or how to carefully pour acid into water and not the other way around to avoid explosions. The workshop for a time echoed with a second set of footsteps and even quiet chatter. But as the months passed with no shiny gold or miraculous elixir to show for it, the youth's initial eagerness began to wane. The long hours of dull preparation, the stinging fumes that made his eyes red, the endless cleaning of sooty glassware, and the patience required to watch a colorless liquid drip, this was not the grand adventure the boy had imagined. He grew restless and eventually disillusioned. One blustery winter morning, after a particularly disappointing failed experiment, the apprentice politely announced that he wished to leave. He had an opportunity, he said, to assist a blacksmith in a nearby town, work that, while hard, at least produced useful wares and predictable results. The alchemist understood. With a gentle smile and kind words, he let the boy go, even gifting him a small book of medicinal recipes as a parting present. He could not blame the lad. This path is not for everyone, and so the workshop fell silent once more. Since then, he has carried on alone, just he and his flickering hopes amid the quiet crackle of coals. In truth, he sometimes prefers the solitude now. There is a peace in not having to explain or justify his actions to anyone, but on especially dark, discouraging nights, he does miss the simple sound of another voice, the presence of another hopeful soul, warming the room for a while. And failure has been a frequent visitor in this room. As the alchemist stands and gazes at his various vessels and concoctions, he can recall the many nights that ended in disappointment. Over there on the floor is a scorch mark near the wall, a fan of black soot radiating from a point on the stone. That was from an accident a few months ago. He had sealed a volatile mixture of spirits and metal filings in a glass retort and placed it deep in the furnace. He was trying to follow a recipe that said to heat the mixture gradually for 40 days. But perhaps he heated it too quickly, or the vessel had a hidden flaw. On the 7th day, while he was dozing lightly with his head on his folded arms at the bench, a sudden bang shattered the midnight silence. The retort exploded, sending shards of glass and a spray of hot, foul-smelling fluid out through the furnace vent. He was fortunate because he had been napping. His face was turned away and partially shielded by his sleeve. Even so, a piece of flying glass nicked his left ear, and the flash of light and noise left him shaken to his core. The stain from that disaster still mars the wall and floor, a dark iridescent splash where the mixture blasted out and burned itself into the stone and plaster. It took him hours by lamplight to scrub away the worst of it, and a ghost of that scorch mark remains, like a shadow that even cleaning cannot remove. He worked silently, almost mechanically, cleaning up glass slivers and wiping chemicals, refusing to let despair overtake him, though tears of frustration did brim in his eyes by the time he finished. That night he wrote in his journal only a single line, his hand trembling with fatigue and emotion. Experiment failed violently. Back to the beginning. Deo gratias that I am alive. Indeed, he quietly thanked Providence that the house hadn't caught fire and that he himself wasn't blinded or maimed. Such incidents taught him caution and humility. Not every disappointment announces itself with a bang, of course. Many failures are heartbreakingly quiet. He remembers one night when a brew in his glass alembic began to display the most marvelous colors, a shimmering iridescence swirling in the fluid. Alchemists call this phenomenon the cauda pavonis, the peacock's tail, for its array of blues, greens, and golds spreading like a fan across the surface of the mixture. According to some texts, these prismatic hues are a hopeful sign that the matter is approaching a crucial stage of transformation. His heart leapt to see them. By the dim light, the liquid in the flask seemed to glow with all the colors of a peacock feather or a rainbow encircling a cloud. Could this be the moment he had waited for? He dared not look away, hardly dared to breathe, watching as the colors shifted and danced subtly. He hovered over the vessel for hours, gently adjusting the heat to nurture this fragile phase. But gradually the beautiful display faded. The vibrant bands of color dulled into a uniform murky brown. By dawn, when he examined the cooled flask, nothing remained but a grainy, lifeless sediment at the bottom. No gold, no crystal elixir, only a fleeting play of light that had stirred his hope and then left him with ash-gray disappointment. He carefully noted the occurrence in his journal nonetheless, describing the colors and their slow disappearance. In the margin, he wrote a small rueful comment to himself. Falsa aurora, false dawn. It stung to pen those words, but he believes in recording truthfully. The peacock's tail had been an enchanting illusion, a tantalizing hint that something in his brew was reacting, but not yet the true dawn of success. Still, he holds that memory close. It showed that his concoction had almost come alive, even if it ultimately died back. It was a glimpse of wonder that keeps him striving, proof that even in failure, nature offers moments of beauty, like a consolation prize for his efforts. Such moments also taught him caution. Now he always shields his face or stands behind a makeshift barrier when heating a new unknown mixture. He has fashioned a kind of screen using an old iron brazier and a few spare bricks to protect himself and the room from flying debris if a vessel bursts. If you look about, you'll see that he has arranged his workspace with safety in mind. A bucket of sand and a bucket of water sit within arm's reach. An overturned bucket actually serves as his stool when he does sit. ready to douse any stray flames. A thick woolen cloth is pinned up beside the furnace, which he can pull across as a curtain if he suspects an impending blast. These precautions have saved him more than once from serious harm. A small leather-bound notebook near the back of the bench is dedicated solely to observations and warnings. Its pages list things like never seal spirits in a full glass vessel without venting, and add acid to water, never water to acid, and beware the 5th hour of digestion, the vessel may burst. Each entry is written in a shaky hand after some near disaster. Over time, he has become as much a safety engineer as an alchemist, though of course that term doesn't exist yet. It's simply the hard-earned wisdom of one who works with unpredictable substances in the dead of night. Yet even with all his care, he bears the scars of past mistakes. His hands have a couple of small white scars and a shiny patch or two from acid burns. There's a faint scar on his jawline, a thin line where a shard of glass from an exploding flask cut him. At the time, he bandaged it clumsily himself, whispering a prayer that infection would not set in, and continued his work. These marks on his body are like a private journal of the hazards of alchemy, etched in skin. He flexes his fingers from time to time as he works, to ward off stiffness. Mercury vapors sometimes give him a tremor. He's noticed, especially when he's been distilling cinnabar or other mercury compounds. The shakes come and go. He occasionally stifles a cough that has lingered ever since an incident of inhaling toxic fumes some years back. The pursuit of the stone has certainly taken a physical toll on him. Doubt is another constant hazard. Doubt in himself. Doubt in the art. Sometimes in his most disheartened moments, he wonders if any of it is real. What if the philosopher's stone is merely a myth or a metaphor, and he has wasted his life chasing a chimera? He quickly banishes that thought whenever it creeps in, for it feels like a blasphemy against hope. No, he tells himself firmly, the stone exists. The old masters would not all lie. God would not instill such yearning for truth in human hearts, only for it to be a cruel joke. There is a design in the universe. His faith assures him of that. He just must persist and pray for enlightenment. It comforts him to lean on that faith. Many times he has knelt in this very room by that little crucifix, praying earnestly after a failure. He prays not for riches or glory, but for understanding. Lord, grant me the wisdom to see the path, as you granted to Bezaleel the wisdom to work metals for your temple, he might whisper, recalling biblical artisans. In his mind, if he ever does succeed, it will be by divine grace as much as by his own hand. And indeed, there are tantalizing rumors that keep his hope flickering. He has heard the tale of Nicolas Flamel, a modest French scrivener who lived not too long ago in Paris, and who, according to whispers, actually discovered the philosopher's stone. The story goes that Flamel, after acquiring a mysterious arcane manuscript and studying it diligently with the help of his wife Perenelle, succeeded in creating the stone around the year 1382. People say he used it to turn lead into gold and to concoct healing elixirs. It did not go unnoticed that Flamel, once a relatively poor bookseller, suddenly became quite wealthy in his later years. Records show he donated generously to churches and paid for almshouses and hospitals for the poor. Those who believe the legend attribute his fortune to alchemical gold. Whether the story is true or greatly exaggerated, our alchemist finds it inspiring. If a humble, bookish man like Flamel could crack the code, perhaps the art is not impossible after all. There are older whispers, too, of an Arabian sage long ago who brewed the elixir of life but perished from the toxic fumes, of an English monk who on his deathbed reportedly produced a tiny amount of gold and credited a secret powder given to him by a wandering adept. Such stories are impossible to verify, part truth, part fable perhaps, yet he holds on to them. They are like the stars in the night sky of his mind, distant, faint, but guiding. Whenever he feels the darkness of doubt closing in, he reminds himself that if even one alchemist in history truly succeeded, then the quest is not in vain. And if it happened once, it could happen again, maybe, God willing, in his own crucible. He takes a deep breath, steadying himself, and refocuses on the present tasks. The smells of the workshop surround him, sharp sulfur and bitter vinegar. Yes, but also the warm waxy scent of the tallow candle burning low, and the underlying chalky odor of old parchment and dust. He rather likes the mix. To him it smells like work and knowledge. He glances at the shelves of ingredients and contemplates his next steps for the night. Perhaps once this distillation is done, he will combine the concentrated spirit of wine with a tincture of herbs to attempt a medicinal cordial. Not everything he does is aimed directly at making gold. Some alchemists, like himself, also seek healing substances. Over the years, he has discovered or prepared various remedies in the course of his experiments, distilling rosewater for calming headaches, concentrating alcohol as an antiseptic, concocting mercury-based salves, though those do more harm than good, he's found. These he considers side benefits of the art. For instance, a few years ago, he learned to refine certain metals in ways that revealed new elements. Trying to purify copper, he melted it with some minerals and unexpectedly isolated a small bead of silver that was hidden in the copper ore. Tangible proof that in nature, metals can contain one another. Another time, by carefully distilling vitriol, sulfate, he produced a pungent, clear acid that hissed and smoked when it touched metal. It was far stronger than common vinegar, capable of dissolving things previously thought indissoluble. It astonished him and nearly burned a hole in his workbench before he contained it. He recorded the formula for that oil of vitriol, as he called it, and uses it now and then for certain processes. He also accidentally produced a gas in one experiment that he couldn't see but that extinguished candles, what we know now as carbon dioxide, though he simply noted it as a strange air that was fatal to flame and mice. Other alchemists produced substances like aqua fortis, nitric acid, and butter of antimony, and our alchemist, through correspondence or copying, acquired those recipes too. In short, even though he has not found the stone, his workshop has yielded some genuine discoveries. Many of these early alchemists, himself included, are acting as the first chemists, though they think of it as plumbing nature's secrets for the magnum opus. These minor successes give him a spark of joy and a sense of progress, even if they are not the ultimate prize he seeks. Not all experiments are safe to try, however. In his bolder younger days, he attempted to test an elixir on himself. Following instructions from a mystical treatise, possibly attributed to the legendary Paracelsus or Lull, though he isn't sure of its true origin, he dissolved a minuscule quantity of gold in a mixture of distilled wine alcohol and special herbs, creating a ruby red tincture that, according to the text, was supposed to cure disease and prolong life. With a whispered prayer and hand trembling in anticipation, he dared to ingest a few drops. The result was immediate and dire. A searing pain knifed through his belly. He broke into a cold sweat and collapsed to the floor, overcome by violent nausea. His vision blurred, ears ringing, as his body forcefully rejected the supposed elixir. He spent 2 days thereafter shivering with fever, his insides feeling as though they had been scoured with hot coals. Those few drops had been poison, not panacea. It was a humbling and frightening lesson. Once he recovered enough to hold a quill, he noted in his journal that the so-called elixir yields naught but torment, no quintessence obtained. Ever since, he has been extremely cautious about testing any new potion on himself or anyone else. Even now, years later, He occasionally feels a lingering ache in his stomach on cold mornings, a subtle reminder of that youthful folly. The ordeal taught him that not every glittering concoction is truly the legendary drinkable gold that alchemists seek. Some are merely toxic brews of misplaced hope. And so he approaches any recipe for internal use with great skepticism and care, knowing the difference between medicine and poison can be a few grains of dose or a single misstep in distillation. The night deepens. He continues working through these small tasks quietly. Occasionally, he moves a finished flask aside or adds a new ingredient to a simmering crucible. You see him lift a lid here, stir a mixture there, always gently, always listening to the sounds of the vessels as if they spoke a language. Perhaps they do to him. Time is peculiar in this little workshop. The alchemist works by the rhythm of his materials rather than by any clock or sun. Right now, it might be long past midnight, but he remains awake because certain mixtures must be tended or observed at specific intervals regardless of the hour. Perhaps he fed more charcoal to the furnace at midnight and must keep it steadily hot until the first light of dawn. Or perhaps he added a particular powder to a flask an hour ago and needs to watch for any color change in these next hours, ready to quench the fire at a critical moment. So he cannot sleep, not yet. Over the years, he has grown accustomed to an owlish existence. He naps when he can, sometimes a brief collapse onto a sack of straw in the corner during the afternoon, or a stolen hour of sleep with his head on his arms at the bench while something slowly distills, whatever his body demands to keep going. But often he stays up through the heart of the night, sustained by determination and a bit of spiced wine or strong herbal tea. He sometimes smiles to himself, thinking he lives more like a nocturnal creature than a man among men, but he doesn't mind the night. In fact, he finds comfort in it. The darkness outside means fewer curious eyes to notice the glow from his windows or the thin plume of smoke from his chimney. The streets are empty, so no one knocks on his door, except perhaps a stray cat or a mouse in the wall, making its small presence known. If a crucible clangs or a liquid hisses unexpectedly, there's no one around to hear it and wonder. The midnight hour is his ally, wrapping the workshop in a cocoon of silence and secrecy. And secrecy is essential, for our alchemist must be careful, very careful. Alchemy in this age walks a fine and often perilous line. On one hand, it is a pursuit of nature's hidden truths, which some learned or high-born individuals cautiously respect or even support. There are nobles and clergymen who dabble in alchemy, or at least patronize alchemists, hoping to gain riches or miraculous cures. On the other hand, many more view alchemy with suspicion, fear, or outright condemnation. To the common townsfolk, an alchemist can easily be imagined as a sort of sorcerer or diabolist in league with dark forces. They catch wind of the strange smells that sometimes emanate from his workshop, sulphurous and sharp, or they notice him trudging home with bags of odd ingredients like quicksilver, salts, and sulfur, and their tongues start wagging. He's trying to turn lead into gold, one neighbor might say with a knowing nod, repeating the common rumor, "Mark my words, he's meddling with things man ought not, perhaps calling up demons," another whispers. Superstition runs deep, and anything remotely alchemical can be lumped together with forbidden sorcery in the minds of ordinary folk. Our alchemist is acutely aware of how dangerous such talk could become. A sudden accusation of heresy or witchcraft could bring the church's inquisitors or a panicked mob to his door. And so, he lives quietly and gives the public as little reason as possible to focus on him. By day, he maintains a modest persona. Perhaps he also practices as an apothecary or healer that would be a common guise for alchemists, many of whom were indeed physicians or pharmacists. He will oblige a neighbor with a gentle smile, providing a simple herbal cure if asked. If someone complains of chills, he might prepare a small vial of warming tincture from ginger and wine. If a child has a rash, he'll grind up marigold petals into a soothing salve. These honest remedies earn him a bit of coin and some trust from the townsfolk. They see him as a learned, if eccentric man who can help with mundane ailments. That trust is a small protection. For instance, he might grind a bit of dried chamomile and willow bark into a tea to ease an old farmer's throbbing head, or offer a syrup of poppy for someone's sleepless nights. Perhaps he will fetch a jar of ointment he made from comfrey and honey to speed the healing of a neighbor's wound. These remedies are modest but effective, and the townspeople do appreciate them. In those moments, he takes quiet pride that at least some of his knowledge directly helps others. It is a different sort of alchemy, turning plants into healing, bringing comfort out of the simplest gifts of nature, and in giving relief to a suffering neighbor, he finds a measure of meaning that sometimes eludes him in his grander quest. Still, he keeps more controversial matters to himself. If he needs sulfur or saltpeter, ingredients also used by blacksmiths or in medical concoctions, he buys them matter-of-factly, not hinting at any arcane purpose. When he needs something truly suspicious, like quicksilver, mercury, or fragments of strange minerals, he might send away by courier to a larger city's merchant, rather than asking the local shop and raising eyebrows. And he always disposes of any obviously bizarre waste, discreetly. He learned that after one incident early on, when he dumped some spent chemicals behind his shed and the grass died in patches, neighbors muttered about curses until the winter snows calmed that talk. He has heard cautionary tales too. Not long ago, in another town, an alchemist's workshop was raided by authorities after rumors spread that he had defrauded people with promises of gold. The man was apparently jailed under accusations of coinage forgery and sorcery. In some places, alchemy is illegal unless done under license because rulers fear fraudulent coin makers and the economic disruption that actual transmutation could cause. Indeed, in England, King Henry IV issued a decree in 1404 banning alchemy, specifically the multiplication of metals, under pain of felony. And in 1317, Pope John XXII in Avignon had condemned the pretended alchemists who promise impossible riches. Such edicts aren't always strictly enforced, but they loom overhead. Our alchemist works in the shadow of those who came before, and sometimes paid dearly for it. He remembers hearing of an alchemist at a certain German prince's court, who, after repeatedly failing to produce the gold he had boasted of, was accused of fraud and executed as an example. These stories send a shiver through him. He has no patron demanding results under threat of death, thankfully, but the principle stands. One must be very careful about whom to trust and what to claim. For these reasons, he values the secrecy and solitude of his nocturnal labors. The little house he occupies is tucked away at the end of a narrow lane, half hidden behind a wall of ivy and a courtyard with a stout gate. He chose it for its discreet location. The workshop room itself has only one small window, which he keeps shuttered and curtained at night to prevent any telltale glows or flashes from drawing attention. The chimney that vents his furnace smoke is cleverly joined to the flue of his kitchen hearth, so that to an outsider it looks like nothing more than a humble cook fire burning late. Even the occasional strange odor is often dismissed by neighbors as the byproduct of him brewing medicines, or perhaps experiments in apothecary work, which they tolerate. Still, gossip can never be entirely quelled. He recalls a minor incident. One summer evening, an unpleasant sulfurous stench seeped from his windows. He was distilling orpiment, an arsenic sulfide, which reeks of rotten eggs. A couple of townsfolk passing by coughed and made the sign of the cross. The next day, the cobbler's wife cautiously asked him if everything was all right, because a devil's smell had been around. He had to laugh kindly and show her that he had simply been rendering animal fat to make a new batch of lamp oil and cleaning some old ingredients, half-truths, but enough to ease her mind. He gave her a small pot of lavender salve for her troubles. After that, he made a habit of doing the truly smelly operations, either in the dead of night or in a little shed in his back garden, where the odors dissipate into the air, away from prying noses. As for the church, he remains a dutiful son in outward appearances. He attends Mass on Sundays, bows his head in all the right places, and never speaks of alchemy to any clergyman unless he knows them to be learned and sympathetic. There are a few educated monks who secretly share his interest, but correspondence with them is conducted in careful Latin euphemisms. He is mindful that while many alchemists view their work as uncovering the divine laws of God's creation, church authorities might not see it that way, so he keeps a low profile, blending in as just another slightly eccentric scholar in town. Despite all these precautions, he sometimes can't help but feel eyes upon him. A pair of gossips at the market might fall silent when he walks by. The town bailiff might give him an extra long look on a day he purchases an unusual batch of materials. It could be paranoia, or it could be that rumors swirl under the surface. But the months and years have passed without incident, and he intends to keep it that way. Back in the workshop, he glances toward the door to reassure himself that it is bolted from the inside. It is. Outside, the wind may be picking up a little. He hears a distant rattle of a loose shutter somewhere down the lane, but not his. His is secure. Inside, the air is warm, almost stifling, and thick with the combined aromas of his work. A normal person might find it oppressive, but he finds it homey in its own peculiar way. Now, seeing that the distillation is nearly complete, the dripping has slowed considerably, indicating most of the spirit has come over. He tends to a different part of his great work. In a far corner stands a squat incubator chest wrapped in blankets, a homemade device he crafted to keep substances at a consistently warm temperature for long periods. He walks over to it, drawing back a heavy cloth that covers it. Inside is what he calls his oratorium laboratorium. In one, a sacred little space for an experiment that must be hidden from prying eyes, and even from stray light. Within the incubator chest, kept gently warm by a bed of manure and straw that smolders very lightly, is a large glass flask, sealed tightly with wax. Months ago, he placed a carefully prepared mixture inside this flask, a combination of what alchemists call the prima materia, first matter. It included dissolved gold, a portion of purified mercury, some traces of other metals, and certain organic substances like egg yolk, wine dregs, and secret herbs, all mixed and putrefying together. He buried that flask in the manure bed, the digesting medium that provides natural uniform heat akin to the warmth of a womb or the depths of the earth. This setup he left undisturbed in darkness, checking only occasionally. He opens the chest now, and the pungent smell of fertile earth and ammonia wafts up. He wrinkles his nose, but peers keenly at the flask inside. It is swaddled in cloth to protect it from light and to buffer temperature changes. He gently pulls aside the cloth covering the glass. By the glow of a small taper, he observes its contents. The mixture inside has turned a deep black and looks almost gelatinous. Alchemists refer to this as the negrito, the black stage of putrefaction. This blackness, though ugly, is actually a sign he expected. Many texts say that when you see the raven's head, you are on your way. It means the ingredients have broken down to their primal state. He notes with a bit of satisfaction that there is indeed a uniform ebony sludge in the flask. That is good. or at least not bad. It hasn't dried out or turned into something else. He rotates the flask slightly. The sludge inside is thick, almost tar-like, clinging to the glass. No hint of white or other colors yet. In alchemical doctrine, after the negrito, one should eventually see an albedo, a whitening or clearing as the material purifies. He sees no sign of that. If anything, a few oily iridescent sheens swirl on the surface, a bit like that peacock tail he saw in another context. But that could just be scum. He knows better than to get excited. This particular long experiment needs many more weeks, maybe even the symbolic 40 days or more of gentle heat to reach the next stage, if it ever does. With a patient sigh, he mutters a short prayer, perhaps something like Fiat voluntas tua, thy will be done, committing the outcome to God. Then he carefully covers the flask with its cloth and closes the incubator chest, latching it securely. Hidden in that warm darkness, the material will continue to ferment, and he hopes eventually blossom into the white queen stage of alchemy, a paler, more hopeful substance. And beyond that, perhaps months from now, with further nurturing, it might undergo a rubedo, a reddening, which would mean the philosopher's stone is at hand. These are all distant dreams at the moment. Still, tending this quiet, hidden experiment gives him a sense of slow, growing progress, like tending a seed buried in soil. Returning to his main bench, he sees that the alembics receiver is now full of the distilled spirit, a clear, strong alcohol distillate. He removes the alembic's heat source and carefully dismantles the glassware, stoppering the receiver flask. He holds it up and peers through the glass. The liquid inside is colorless and very potent. If he were to sniff it, which he does cautiously, it has a sharp, clean bite that catches his breath. This is good aqua vitae. He sets it aside to cool. Such distilled spirit will be useful for many things. Extraction of plant essences, as a burning fuel for certain experiments, and as a preservative or even medicine in small doses. Now, the hour is growing late indeed. The candle on his bench has burned down to a puddle of molten wax, the flame quivering low. The temperature in the workshop has increased with all the furnace work and closed shutters. A trickle of sweat meanders down the side of his face. He absent-mindedly wipes it away with a soot-blackened hand, leaving another little streak on his cheek. He glances toward the tiny window up high on the wall. Though shuttered, a thin seam at its edge shows pure darkness outside. How far into the night are we? Perhaps it is 2 or 3 hours past midnight. The quiet is profound. Only the faint ticking of his cooling metal tools and the slow drip of an unseen leak somewhere break the silence. His own heartbeat is a steady presence in his ears. He blinks slowly, feeling the weight of fatigue on his eyelids at last. It might be wise to rest for a short while, he thinks. Many a time he has pushed through till dawn, only to make a careless mistake in exhaustion. He wants to avoid that tonight. He takes a moment to tidy up a few things. He extinguishes the small taper he used to check the incubator, for instance, since it's not needed now. The furnace and the main candle still cast enough glow. He rearranges some of the clutter, pushing in a chair, corking a bottle of oil of vitriol tightly, placing a loose sheaf of notes back into its folder so it won't accidentally fall onto a flame. These small motions are calming, almost ritualistic, signaling that the long night's work is winding down. Our alchemist allows himself a brief pause by the bench, standing still and just listening. Beyond the heavy wooden door of his workshop, out in the world, a faint change is beginning. If he listens carefully, he might catch the distant crow of a rooster from a farm just outside town. Yes, there it is, a muffled cock-a-doodle-doo carried on the early breeze. The sound makes him lift his head. He realizes the night will soon give way to dawn. His body and mind are now very tired, but there's also a gentle sense of completion. He has made it through another long, solitary night of work. He moves to the little window and gently nudges the shutter open a crack, just enough to peer out. The air that slips in is much colder than the warm room behind him, and it carries the fresh, damp scent of early morning. The sky is still predominantly dark, but has softened to the deepest blue along the eastern horizon. Stars are fading, and the black dome of night is beginning to yield. In the east, beyond the rooftops of the slumbering town, a sliver of pale light is growing. Dawn is approaching. He takes a moment to breathe in the cool air. It feels refreshing on his face, which is flushed from the furnace heat. As he breathes, he notices the world undergoing a subtle transformation beyond his window. The ramshackle roofs and chimney pots that minutes ago were mere black outlines are now edged with a soft silver blue halo of pre-dawn light. The grimy cobblestones of the lane glisten with dew, catching the first hints of brightness. In a sense, the entire town is undergoing a quiet transmutation of its own, night's darkness turning into morning's gold. Even the cold stones of the nearby church tower are flushed with a rosy hue in this nascent light. Nature accomplishes effortlessly, every dawn, a symbolic version of what he labors at, bringing light out of darkness, gold out of gray. The alchemist allows himself a small, tired smile at that thought. It is as if the universe is gently reminding him that change and renewal are woven into creation's cycles, and perhaps one day his own long night of toil will similarly yield to a golden dawn of discovery. He closes the shutter gently and secures it. No need for outsiders to see that soft glow and wonder what he's been up to all night. Inside the workshop, the candle flame looks weaker now against the encroaching subtle light of dawn filtering through the cracks. He methodically begins to bank the furnace fire, that is, to damp it down so it will burn low and slow until he resumes. He closes the vents most of the way and pushes the glowing coals closer together. He adds a scoop of ash from a bucket and spreads it over the embers to partially smother them. The coals protest with a few sparks and pops, then settle into a dim, enduring glow like sullen rubies. The Athanor will keep them alive for many hours, ready to be stoked again when needed, but now they won't throw much flame or heat. He moves around the workshop, performing small closing rituals. He makes sure every volatile substance is capped or put away. He double-checks that the jar of aqua regia, a sharp mixture of acids, is sealed and set in a safe corner, and that the barrel of alcohol is tightly shut. He glances at his notebook and decides to leave it open to dry the last lines of ink he wrote. Its final entry for this night reads something like, "Distilled spiritus vini, 7th circulation complete. Result clear 2 Libre of spirit." Next to that, a marginal doodle of a tiny sun and moon conjoined, his hopeful symbol for one day achieving the union of opposites. He smiles faintly at the doodle, then closes the book and ties it shut with a cord. He places it inside the cabinet and locks it with a small key that hangs on a cord around his neck. He never leaves that key lying about. He gives the workshop a final sweeping glance. The scene is much as it was at the start of the night, cluttered and dim, yet there is a sense of closure in the air. The alchemist quietly murmurs a few Latin words of thanks, perhaps a short prayer of gratitude that no harm came tonight and that his work continued. Something like, "Gloria tibi Domini, qui me odi servasti." Glory to you, Lord, who has kept me safe this day. Pulling open the heavy door, he steps out into his small walled courtyard. The eastern sky is now definitely light, a cool bluish dawn. A few songbirds have begun tentative morning chirps in the eaves. The air feels crisp and clean compared to the smoky interior he left. He closes the workshop door behind him, locking it with an iron key and sliding a wooden bar across for good measure. The world is still largely asleep. Only a distant baker's wagon can be heard creaking down the main street. and perhaps the far-off clip-clop of a lone rider heading out early. He stands for a moment in the gray morning silence, allowing himself to feel the enormity of his weariness. His breath forms a little cloud in the chill. He realizes he is shivering slightly now that he's stopped moving and the adrenaline of nocturnal work ebbs. Drawing his threadbare robe tighter, he pads across the courtyard to the back door of his modest house. Inside, the house is cold and shadowy. A single ember glows faintly in the kitchen hearth from last night's small cooking fire. Too tired to fuss with rekindling it, he lets it be. In the corner of his humble living space sits a narrow cot piled with blankets. He goes to it and sinks down with a long exhale. His joints protest, his knees and back are stiff, and the bruise on his thigh from bumping into the furnace yesterday throbs dully. Outside the barred window of his bedroom, the first golden beams of the sun are piercing through, painting a stripe on the floor. The day will soon begin for everyone else, but for him, it is time to finally rest. He reflects for a brief moment on the night's efforts. No, he did not find the philosopher's stone tonight. Of course not, he thinks with a whisper of dry humor to himself. But he distilled useful substances, tended long-term experiments, recorded observations, small steps forward, or at least not backwards, and he avoided disaster. Sometimes that is victory enough. As he lies back on the cot, he hears faint sounds of the town awakening, a distant bell tolling prime, the first prayer hour of the day, some voices of merchants setting up stalls. The normal world carries on, oblivious to the secret world of his workshop and the enormity of what he seeks. He allows himself to detach from it all for now. Pulling a coarse wool blanket over himself, he feels the knots of tension in his shoulders slowly unclench. His eyes, which have stared so hard into flickering flames and obscure texts all night, finally get to close. The weight of sleep falls upon him like a gentle, irresistible wave. Before he drifts off, perhaps a final thought flits across his mind. Is it worth it? This life of endless striving, of being so close to wonders, yet never attaining them fully? Yes, he answers himself in silence. Even if he never holds the philosopher's stone in his hands, he has pursued knowledge and meaning as far as he could. In a world full of war, plague, and ignorance, he chose to follow a star of wisdom. There is honor in that, he feels. And who knows, perhaps one day, maybe even by accident, a flicker of true gold will shine at the bottom of his crucible. His breathing deepens. In the dimness of his half-shuttered room, a bar of sunrise light has crept up to touch the wall, illuminating a shelf where a few humble books and a lute gather dust. The lute? He hasn't played it in months, but maybe in his dreams he'll strum a gentle tune of bygone days. A slight smile comes to his lips as sleep finally takes him. Now, as we step back from this scene, the camera of our mind's eye pulls away from that small house with the hidden workshop. The town around it is coming to life in pastel dawn colors, the baker's chimney releasing fresh bread scents, children beginning their chores, roosters crowing in chorus. No one pauses to think of the lone alchemist, now sleeping on his cot after a laborious night. To them, he is perhaps just a quiet man who knows some remedies, someone who keeps to himself. They do not see the soot-stained walls and flickering alembics, the burnt fingers and dog-eared manuscripts filled with Latin scrawl. They don't realize what a world of desperation and hope has played out while they slept. But you and I have seen it. For a little while, we walked alongside this solitary seeker in the shadows. We felt the heat of his furnace and the weight of his loneliness. We witnessed his unwavering perseverance amid countless failures. It wasn't easy, indeed. It sucked in many ways to be a medieval alchemist. The cramped, smoky workshop, the constant disappointments, the physical dangers of burns and poison, the costliness that could lead one to poverty, the suspicion of society, the fear of persecution by church or state. the endless nights of work with little to show. It was, in objective terms, a rather miserable vocation, and yet there is something quietly noble in his persistence. In the long view of history, these alchemists, toiling in obscurity, kept alive the flame of curiosity and experimentation through the dark and Middle Ages. In the end, their names are mostly forgotten or dismissed as charlatans and dreamers. They themselves, like our alchemist, often died with no riches, no acclaim, perhaps clutching at an unfinished manuscript with a final recipe they hoped would work, their life's work incomplete. But the knowledge they gleaned, bit by bit, laid the groundwork for future generations. In a way, these laborers of esoteric art were like cathedral builders of knowledge. Each alchemist, in their isolated workshop, was placing a small stone of understanding, conducting experiments, recording results, discovering techniques. They toiled without ever seeing the full edifice of truth, often without even knowing if their contributions had any value. Yet taken together, those little stones formed the foundation of new sciences. Centuries later, the principles of modern chemistry and medicine would stand on foundations that alchemists unwittingly helped create. Our alchemist doesn't know this, of course. He would never live to see a periodic table or a Bunsen burner or the prestige of a royal society. But in his pursuit of a dream, he and his kind gathered real truths: how metals melt and combine, how liquids evaporate and condense, how to isolate an element or compound. They kept the lamp of inquiry burning through times when many would have let it die. We may be amused today at their mystical goals, but we owe them a debt for the countless insights they uncovered along the way. They were, without knowing it, building the early stages of a great cathedral of knowledge. Like craftsmen carving stones they would never see assembled, they did their part. In the great human story of discovery, their chapter, though full of frustration and clouded in smoke, was indispensable. Now, our viewpoint comes back to the present, to you listening here. Hello again. You and I have traveled far in this quiet narration. For a time, we kept company with one of history's forgotten dreamers in his lonely vigil. We watched history unfold not as grand events or battles, but as one man's slow, honest struggle in a dim workshop. In doing so, we became part of a fellowship of gentle dreamers, spanning continents and eras. People like him, people perhaps like you, who work patiently in the dark towards something hopeful. Take a moment to appreciate the stillness around you now. Breathe deeply and evenly, feeling the calm that comes from stepping out of our world and immersing in this story for a while. The alchemist's long night is over, and perhaps your day is ending, or has ended too. You've walked in his shoes, and maybe felt a bit of his weariness. It's okay to let your own burdens dissolve for the night. Let them melt away like lead in a crucible, to be reformed into something lighter by morning. You too have done enough. Like our alchemist who finally let himself rest as dawn broke, you can rest now, knowing that in this moment, everything is quiet and safe. Whatever cares or questions you carried, you can set them aside until tomorrow. Now is the time to find your own philosopher's stone in the dream world, a symbol not of gold or magical elixir, but of inner peace and contentment. In your dreams, perhaps you might wander a bit through that medieval workshop again, but this time with a sense of calm understanding, knowing that even if answers are elusive, the journey itself has meaning. Close your eyes, if they aren't closed already, and feel the gentle weight of sleep drawing near. Envision the warm glow of the alchemist's hearth fading to a soft darkness. The room of your mind is growing dimmer, the fumes and worries drifting away. All that remains is a quiet, safe darkness, and the knowledge that across time, many others have watched and waited and hoped in moments just like this. You are not alone. Across centuries, people have looked for meaning under the same stars and found comfort in knowing others did the same. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach, but perhaps do that when you're next awake, as you might be drifting into sleep now. Breathe in deeply and exhale any remaining tension. Feel your body sinking into your bed, the way the alchemist at last sank into his humble cot, letting go of the night's efforts. The fire is banked, the tools are cleaned, the door is barred. All is well for the night. It's time to rest. Allow yourself to sink into the gentle oblivion of sleep. You've kept vigil with me through this long historical night, and now the reward is a peaceful slumber. Good night, sleep well, and until we meet again on another quiet journey, take care.